Okay, so thanks. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chaim Yacobi. I'm a professor at the DPU, and I'm very, very happy to open the first session of the DPU70 Film Festival. I think that it's for me it's a very moving moment because of many reasons. Because part of my personal biography has to do with graduating the master in international housing studies at the DPU, and also the fact that housing is the main topic of the first session. I think it has to do very much with the DPU legacy and the work that was done in the last 70 years around issues of housing in both formal and informal context. So I'm very, very happy to open the first session, and I would like, first of all, to invite my colleague, Dr. Rita Lambert, who will say a few words about the first film that we are going to watch, and then we will do it, the second one with Barbara, the third one with Paroj, and then we will have some time for discussion and questions if you have. Okay? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chaim, and thank you everyone for coming. So I'll be presenting this movie, Towards a Lima with Energy Justice and Dignified Housing. So the story actually starts when, as part of this consortium of institutions, you can see at the bottom, we got funding for the project called GEMDEV. GEMDEV is Grounded Energy Modelling for Equitable Urban Development in the Global South, quite a mouthful. It's led by the UCL Energy Institute. And we were really trying to understand the trajectory of urban poor housing processes, such as auto-construction and government-led slum redevelopment. And we wanted to actually test this long-standing hypothesis that basically says that with time, progress is surely going to be achieved or assured. And that we wanted to expose what are the kind of overlooked aspects of the nexus between housing and energy, precisely because these relate to the notion of refuge in a broader sense. So the project takes a longitudinal approach to understand what happens over time to energy practices, to thermal comfort, as these relate to vulnerability, well-being, and even cultural aspects. So we got the funding in 2019, and as you'll know, this is when the pandemic hit, and we had to rethink absolutely everything from scratch and remotely. So, adopting remote methodologies, and particularly visuals one, came with real challenges, a lot of challenges. And when we are essentially committed precisely to co-producing knowledge and collecting data by asking people to use mobile phones, tablets, or the computer, asking them to become essentially our eyes on the ground and transfer images to researchers based elsewhere can exasperate extraction. So, moreover, the other issues that are related to passing on the camera can also be so very intrusive and problematic. For the camera inserts seamlessly into these very intimate spaces without really participants being necessarily aware of what is being captured and what are the kind of implication of that. So the ethical question that Bourdieu pushes us to becomes even more kind of relevant, this question of how can we not feel anxious about making private worlds public. Also, let's remember that working during the pandemic, people were really facing immense difficulties and traumas. I mean, especially in the case of Peru, where this movie is based, it had the highest mortality rates in the world. Yeah, so for us researchers, can it ever be ethical to continue as usual? And how do we acknowledge what is actually going on? And how can the research process itself be designed to serve and support these communities? So we adopted participatory documentary as a method. And our team is composed of facilitators on the ground from different institutions. And in this case, it's SEMCA, based in Lima. Academics and video firm Spectacle. And we decided that actually a lot of the effort was mainly going to be put on training people to tell their own stories. And this was really demanding and lengthy process in the sense that, because not only is it demanding to work at that pace where you're really committed to training, to co-production, the other thing is we were doing it all remotely. So we drew our efforts and our funds also linking it to this project Reframed, which is led by, is a DPU-led project, Action Research, which was also funded by the DPU itself during the pandemic. And really working again with the same partner, because they were part of the project, and also Kotakita, but really Senka is the one we made the movie with. So really the focus here was on training the trainers, who were local facilitators, remotely, and foregrounding visual ethics. So beyond learning the technical skills and so on, that space became really a place for sharing, a place to reconnect. And for those that were really involved, they spoke a lot about this moment of escape from the sheer desperation that was felt at the time, and being able to use that, what they had learned, to tell other stories. And the film, in a way, beyond, for the GEMDEV research team, the research on energy and housing, it served the team to delve deeper into the issues of energy practices, but really foregrounding fuel stacking as a coping mechanism, collective practices, and also everyday risks which are faced by inhabitants. And so the documentary was filmed in a settlement called Jose Carlos Mariategui. It's essentially an informal settlement on the higher slope of the peripheral hills of Lima. It's 10 minutes long, or a bit less, and it's actually a part one of a sequence of two, but I'm going to only show you this part one because the second one is not yet ready. And the film is a traditional documentary genre, and really it was, although it was edited by the support of Spectacle, who had the kind of the technical skills, it was solidly produced, filmed, and so on, discussed with and by the community. So, so yeah, enjoy, and then maybe there's time to also answer questions on it after. So let me put it on.
Thank you very much, Rita. We'll have questions and discussion at the end, so I will do some reminders also about this short film. So thank you very much. Now we're going to have Barbara.
Which is so frustrating. So Paraj is going to help me to try and deal with the technicalities while I briefly introduce the film. Thank you very much, Paraj, and thanks so much, Rita, for this first film. So first of all, I wanted to say how much of a delight it is to be here to celebrate the 70 years of the DPU, and also to celebrate it through a film festival, which I think is really quite exciting and says a lot about the ways in which development planning communication has evolved, or indeed the ways in which one might be thinking differently about strategies and tactics for alternative forms of planning, whether they're insurgent or co-produce, etc. I'm also delighted to be here because this film is quite meaningful for me, It's meaningful because of the content, so this notion of regeneration, understanding the meaning of regeneration from people who are the cold face of regeneration and often are not heard. And meaningful because it was an extremely experimental film, developed on absolutely a shoestring. And because COVID happened, we managed to close it, but there was never the space to reflect collectively on it, which was part of the original intent. And life has happened, and I haven't come back to it, so today is a moment to come back to it, and hopefully with you try to think, where there's a potential of such approaches. And it makes me want to go back to my partners and say, okay, let's do something with it, because there was something really nice that came out of it. So a little bit about the content. Now we've lost completely. Doesn't matter. The next slide. The next slide was just copies of 3 reports, which sort of inspired, which give you a little bit about the context of this project. And these were reports that I was involved in. The first one by a group called Ubele Initiative, which works with diaspora communities, especially African and Caribbean diaspora communities in London. And they produced a report called A Place to Call Home. And this was an attempt to identify spaces of community spaces in London that were being eroded, closed, diminished because of rampant regeneration in London. And so the idea was to try and track them and make noise about them and understand what was irreplaceable about these spaces. And then the second, on the back of this, we worked with Ubele and a network of community groups in London called Just Space to think about what might be institutionalized ways, not institutionalized, that's the wrong term. How might we call for planning instruments that might be able to better protect such spaces in the context of regeneration, and that might be able to take into consideration and to value the social impact of regeneration, but also what matters in places that are supposedly regenerated, and therefore that need not be erased in process of regeneration, and that was a social impact assessment tool. So this was quite a technical instrument, but we were working with community groups to try and understand how we might be able to collectively shape a social impact assessment tool. And in one of the experimentations around that, because we worked with a number of different groups, one year we worked with a group of young people in London, and we specifically tried to see how can we capture young people's voices in London planning. Young people because they are part of the so-called hard-to-reach groups in consultation processes or participation processes. And here we were particularly working with, in English parlance, BAME, Black and minority ethnic groups, thank you, or racialized, as people might say. So, yeah, so these are the 3 reports. So we had a discussion, and what was obvious from this youth engagement in London planning was that, and it was with colleagues actually, this one with Karen, I can see here, what was obvious from this report was just how alienating all of these participatory processes were. Young people don't feel interested, heard, don't trust them, etc. And so there was a massive frustration about these processes of participation, and yet the need, also one of the frustration was that these processes were just not able also to tap into the creativity and agency of these groups. And so we were thinking we really need to find different ways of hearing those voices as a first step to then start advocating for different ways of doing things. And so we had discussion with these 2 organizations, Ubele Initiative and Pempeople, and then there was a little bit of money that became available through UCL Culture at the time, £2,000, that's all. And then luckily DPU helped also a little bit. To try and experiment with different ways of capturing these voices. And so the initial idea was to try and use spoken word and theater, a little bit inspired by the theater of the oppressed, to try and think, to try basically and capture realities of regeneration and aspirations in young people's own words. But the idea about this kind of practice was that it's a way for people to express themselves, but also to hear from others, and to engage into a conversation, and then to try and think collectively about ways of acting. So this was the idea. There was the idea that we'd have 3 workshops and a collective reflection at the end. And then, of course, COVID happened, and all of this was derailed. And so what happened is that we retrieved 2 online workshops. And so we were working with poet Kat François and multimedia artist Kat François, and also Daniel Oduntan. And Kat was going to help get young people to talk from Peckham and Brixton. And eventually we said, okay, let's try and film this. So Daniel also joined the group so that we can maybe tell a story, later collectively reflect upon it. And this is the story that you're going to hear. But I just wanted to say, Daniel and Kat Daniel did an amazing piece of work. He actually brought it all together. And it looks like, it's a wonderfully packaged product, but actually it was extremely difficult to have these conversations in workshops where young people were feeling completely alienated under lockdown. Some came, many other issues came up around mental health, etc. We had a big drop off of participation, and then a lot of work was trying to be done also outside of the workshop. So anyway, this is what the film is about, and hopefully we don't have interruption.
Actually, Ricardo helped us sign into his premium account so that we don't get ads. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. And yes, enjoy it.
So, Stella, what did you do that?
Now we will move forward.
So hi everyone, thank you for coming and joining us today. The DPU, this is a very special moment. The film festival, we have been thinking about it for a bit, and it's great that it's coming together, the DPU70 context. So I'm just going to talk very little actually and let the film speak for itself, because but just tell you a couple of things, the context and the process in which the film came together. And the film is called Unhomely City, Navigating Houselessness in a Pandemic. And as you can see from some of the stills, screenshots of the stills from the film, this film was trying to capture the situation, that houseless communities in the context of Mumbai, but really what we were trying to talk about is in mostly Indian and South Asian cities were facing during the lockdown. So the film came together very much during the lockdown, keeping the lockdown in mind, keeping COVID-19 in mind, and one of the things that and it was a result of a research project that was funded by the DPU internal grant. And one of the things that we started noticing quite early on the pandemic and in the lockdown, and in the way the houseless communities were being treated, was that in the governance of the pandemic, there was a very sort of developmental-centric, a house-centric idea of safety that was circulating, which the stay home, stay safe, around which the governance of the pandemic was centered. And it basically meant that the government is going to protect those who are able to spatially confine themselves in what is understood as a house, but was quite oblivious of, or deliberately overlooked, I would say, situations or people, of conditions of people who were living on the streets and open spaces. So it was, and on the other hand, the other aspect of it was that these groups, these bodies were seen as threats during the pandemic. Being out in the open, being out in the public was seen as threats to the so-called urban gentry. And there was this effort to deliberately confine them, to put them through situations of really carceral conditions. So we have this image again, still from the documentary, where we didn't capture the moment, but we have the community telling us that what it meant for them when the police rounded them up and took them and forcefully put them behind the bars, or forcefully put them in an institutional shelter, how their practices and experiences of home were completely altered, were completely disregarded, was one aspect of the story. The other aspect was the kind of oppression and the kind of violence that they faced as a result of this. So the process was, it was, like I said, it was funded, and I would say it was really flexible. The funding was very flexible in the way we wanted to disseminate our findings, in the way we wanted to sort of create an impact. So making the film at that time for us was to be able to document or create an archive of the time of what was happening. But it turned out to be a lot more than that. So this was done through the formation of a collective where academics, filmmakers, community organizers, activists, and more importantly, members of the community came together to discuss the various themes of the film. So what we see here is basically the script, the initial iterations of the script, which was passed down at several levels, which was sent back to the community to talk about issues of representation. Is this how you want your story to be told? How do you want your story to be told? So it was quite a messy process, evidently, yes, it was around issues of representation on how do you want to sort of what kind of urban resident do you want to, or what kind of an urban identity do you want to represent yourself with? These were the core questions that were, we were sort of stuck quite a bit in even conceptually getting around this. It follows very conventional filmmaking techniques and which is aligned to reflect research findings and voices from the community through shaping of the scripts, visuals, voiceovers, several rounds of editing. So it meant, so when the filmmaker and the research team was actually was filming in Mumbai, a lot of it was guided by what the community want to be represented, what they wanted to show, how they wanted to represent the voices. And let me tell you, not all of it was stories of oppression, even during the time of pandemic. So there were birthday parties they wanted to be sort of filmed. There were moments of social gathering that they said that, why don't you film us this way? So it was also representation, in a way trying to tell us that look, we see home and we experience home in a particular way, and first and foremost we want that to be acknowledged, and we want the city and the wider audience to see that. So very interestingly, we said that it emerged as a sort of a chronicle of the time, as a chronicle of the purpose of the documentary was to sort of really create an archive of what was happening. But there was this film has a life now post production. It's been used as a pedagogic tool. It's been used as a tool for advocacy. We have been able to sort of share this with government, with policymakers, and particularly government officers who were during the time of the pandemic were in quite important positions. And really, it's been a matter of kind of conceptually sort of being at conflicts with some of these ideas of who deserves to be in the city, and that this film has become a conversation started in many contexts. Solidarity building, and what you see again, the two photos are sorry. I'll just leave it at that. These are two images, most recent images of the film being shown to the communities and what results and what comes after that, right? And one of the photos over here is a discussion of the film, and sort of runs into this terrain of capacity building, and sort of turns into this terrain of what do we do when the police comes to catch us? How do we sort of dodge CCTVs? So I can talk more about it in our discussions later, but I just want to leave it at the fact that this is, I think the film has kind of got a more interesting life after it's been produced. So, yeah.
So thank you very much. I think it was great to see that, how COVID created the kind of impressive and, it was a challenge, but when I see the results of it, and I remember some of our conversations during COVID about, how can we proceed with our research, what can we do while we are in London, and, our research is elsewhere. So I think, creativity is something that came very, very clearly, and I think in a very beautiful way. What I would like to do is to try and, to think, or to share with you some of my thoughts, because I think that what I learned from the 3 films is that, first of all, pandemic and remote methodology, despite of the challenges, I think it really allows knowledge reproduction and co-production, and I think that Rita, I really like what you discuss. The whole question of the ethics of making such a film. What do we owe to the community? Do we have the right to represent them? What are the boundaries between us who are, functioning the machine of making a documentary and the participants? I think it also came very, very strongly, Barbara, in the film that you presented, and I think also very much in the case of Mumbai. So I think the question of representation, the question of ownership on the production of a film, of a documentary, is something that was very, very central. What came very, very clearly, and I think we discuss it a lot at the DPU, through different perspectives, is really the informal and the formal, the global south and the global north divide. And I think what came very, very, in a very interesting way in the 3 films is that the notion of the urban is central and much more relevant than the division between global south, global north. And I think many of the issues that came or that were expressed in the documentary that Barbara presented, I think they are repeated or echoed in the other cases. So I think there is a provocative argument maybe in the combination of the 3 films together. And I would argue that especially while we are discussing housing, because as we could see, the main problem of housing is that it is a commodity. There's no other way to make the message softer and nicer. And I think even in a case of informality or the case of houseless people, but also in the case of regeneration, gentrification, and I would say, I will use David Sibley's idea of the purification of space. We can see how housing is a sphere of power relations, a sphere of struggle, and the attempt of some to purify space for others. And I think regeneration projects, are maybe the most vocal example of this struggle. I thought that the whole issue of energy poverty was very interesting for me, from true urban health perspective, because we can see that we tend to speak about the social determinants of health, but I think we should speak about the social determinants of housing, and to look at it from a different perspective, because we can see how housing is linked to employment, to food, to mobility, and can we really, as development experts, divide or separate between these different spheres? I'm not so sure. So I think, again, this was something that came very, very clearly in all 3 films. So I've mentioned, the neoliberal logic of housing, It came very clearly in Mumbai, and I think also very, very clearly in London. And what is very important to remember is that the subjects of these processes, they have color, they have gender, they belong to a specific class. So again, I think, to understand the politics and the political economy of housing through these films is fascinating, because we can see that we are talking about a global phenomena that goes beyond the specific characteristics of each site or of each city. I really think that also in the case of Mumbai, it was very interesting to see that not only housing is a commodity, but also sanitation. And I think, it symbolized, in my view, the process through which the last, we're going through in the last 3 decades or so, a very, very intensive process of, a super capitalist process of housing production, of space production, and I really felt that, Colin McFarlane's idea of the right to city life, not the right to the city, but the right to city life, is very, very central to the 3 films, and for us to understand, housing as, one of the most important development issues, I would argue, these days. I really like, the very different visual expression of each film. I really like, the idea of the vertical format that was very central to what Barbara presented. That also I think delivered very nicely the message of who did the film, who took it, and I think in the other cases maybe it was a kind of a more traditional way of filming, but again I think there were some moments that I was like, whoa, what's going on here? Because even the way in which the informal settlement that you documented is presented, it's something that you ask yourself, is it a city, is it a neighborhood, is it a village? What are the relationship between the natural environment and the built environment, and think how it is linked to informality. That was very, very clear. And I also felt that the images, the rough images of street dwellers, there was something I could really feel that I'm there. I mean, there was something that came very, very directly for me as a part of the audience. And finally, I really feel that it has a great pedagogic value. As I told Rita, I really feel that I should start using your documentaries in my teaching, because I think it delivers some very, very interesting and important issues. So thank you very, very much to the 3 of you.